The coffee was $7. Victoria Ashford handed the barista her black Amex, the kind with no limit, the kind that said money would never be a concern. The card declined. "Try it again," Victoria said, her voice tight. Declined. Again. "Do you have another card?" Victoria opened her Hermes wallet. Inside, $300 bills she'd carried for 2 years without ever needing them. "I have cash, 100, but can't make change, not at 6 a.m. Behind Victoria, a line was forming. A businessman checking his watch. A nurse in scrubs that had been washed so many times the blue had faded to gray. And a man in a yellow hoodie, faded, a hole in the left sleeve, holding the hand of a small boy in a red jacket. The man stepped forward, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. "Her coffee," he said quietly, "and 1 hot chocolate, extra whipped cream." Victoria's face burned. "You don't have to—" "I have $7, the man interrupted. His voice was calm, factual. "You don't. Right now, at this moment, that makes me richer than you." He said it without cruelty, without triumph, just truth. Victoria wanted to explain that she had billions, that her apartment overlooked Central Park, that she employed 15,000 people. But standing in a coffee shop with a declined credit card, all of that felt like a story she'd been told about someone else. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. The man nodded, took his son's hot chocolate, disappeared into the morning crowd. Victoria stood there, $7 latte in hand, and felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been sealed for 41 years. She'd just been saved by a stranger in a hoodie with a hole in it, and she didn't even know his name. Victoria's office was 40 stories above Manhattan. Glass walls, Herman Miller chairs, air that smelled like filtered nothingness. No scent, no life, just expensive emptiness. She called her accountant. "My cards don't work." "I sent 3 emails yesterday. IRS audit. Your accounts are frozen for 30-60 days. Standard procedure for high net worth individuals." Victoria hung up, stared at her hands. Manicured, soft, hands that had never cleaned anything, carried anything heavy, done anything that left calluses or scars. She thought about the man's hands, the way they'd held the crumpled 10 like it mattered, because it did matter. Because $10 was probably, what, an hour of work? More? Her assistant knocked. "Your 7 a.m. Custodial Services Quarterly Review." Victoria had forgotten. She always forgot these meetings. Facilities managers presenting PowerPoints she never read, about people she never saw. 3 people entered. A facilities manager, whose name Victoria had never learned, a security guard, and the man from the coffee shop. He looked different in the fluorescent office light. Older than she'd thought. Late 30s, maybe. Lines around his eyes that said he didn't sleep enough. The yellow hoodie was a uniform shirt underneath. Custodial Services printed across the chest in letters worn nearly invisible. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered. "Miss Ashford, this is Marcus Reed, night shift supervisor, 8 years with the company. He has a proposal about—" But Victoria was staring at Marcus. "You work here?" "Yes, ma'am." "How long?" 8 years. 8 years. This man had cleaned her office, probably this very office, for 8 years. Had emptied her trash, wiped her desk, made her world spotless and invisible. And she'd never seen him. Not once. "You work nights?" 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then I pick up my son, Elijah, he's 7, and take him to school. Sleep from 9 to 3, pick him up again, homework, dinner, bedtime by 7:30. Back here by 10. That's the schedule. Victoria did the math in her head. 5 hours of sleep, maybe 6.
every single day, for 8 years. "That's not sustainable," she said before she could stop herself. "It's what single parents do, Miss Ashford. We sustain the unsustainable because there's no other option. Elijah needs a parent who shows up, not just a paycheck. This way I can do both." "Barely," Victoria said before she could stop herself. "Barely is enough," Marcus replied. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "Barely means Elijah eats breakfast with me before school. Barely means I'm there when he cries about his mother leaving. Barely means he knows I chose him over sleep, over comfort, over everything. That's not barely. That's everything." Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. The meeting continued. The facilities manager talked about green cleaning products, cost savings, efficiency metrics. Victoria approved everything without listening, because she was still hearing Marcus's voice. Barely is enough. After they left, Victoria sat in her glass-walled office and stared at Manhattan spreading below her like a kingdom. She'd built an empire on people like Marcus, people who sustained the unsustainable so she could have clean floors and empty trash cans and a world that functioned invisibly. And this morning, when her empire had failed her, Marcus had given her $7. Not because he had money to spare, because he'd seen her, really seen her, standing there with $100 bill she couldn't use, humiliated and small. And he'd made her human again, for the price of 12 minutes of his labor. Victoria picked up her phone, called her assistant. "Find out everything about Marcus Reed. His file, his schedule, his everything. I need to understand." "Understand what, Miss Ashford?" "What it costs," Victoria said quietly, "to be the person who saved me." Subscribe to Becca's Stories for powerful narratives every day about the moments that break us open and force us to see. Comment below, when was the last time you were humiliated by something simple? What did it teach you?
At 11 p.m. that night, Victoria took the service elevator to the basement. The custodian floor smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, not the soft LED glow of the executive floors, but harsh white that made everyone look tired. Marcus was surprised to see her. "Miss Ashford, is something wrong?" "I want to understand," Victoria said. "Your work. Your life. I want to see what I've been missing." Marcus studied her. She was still in her Armani suit, still wearing heels that cost more than his monthly rent, but something in her face, raw desperation, maybe, made him nod. "If you're gonna watch, you're gonna work. I don't have time for tourists." He handed her a mop. Victoria stared at it. The handle was rough, worn smooth in places where thousands of hands had gripped it. The mop head smelled like chemicals and old water. "I've never—" "Then tonight you learn," Marcus said. The work destroyed her. Not just physically, although her back screamed after an hour, her hands blistered, her feet bled inside her expensive shoes, but something deeper. Something about pushing a mop across floors she'd walked on for 15 years without ever thinking about who cleaned them. Each stroke of the mop was a confession. "I didn't see you. I didn't see you. I didn't see you." At 2 a.m., during their 15-minute break, Victoria sat in the basement break room and wept. Not delicate tears, ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere she'd sealed shut when her father died and left her his empire and told her to be strong. "I can't do this," Victoria gasped. "How do you do this? Every night. For years." Marcus handed her his water bottle, waited until she drank. "You want to know how?" Marcus said quietly.
Because every stroke of this mop is a battle. Every clean window is me saying, I exist. I matter. My work matters. You think I'm just cleaning? I'm fighting a war. Against the people who look through me, against the system that says manual labor is worthless, against every person who's ever treated me like furniture. He pulled out a notebook, duct-taped spine, pages worn soft from being touched. For 8 years, I've been writing this. Every lunch break, every spare minute, a proposal for how to make this company see us. Real wages, real benefits, real dignity. This is my battle cry, Miss Ashford. Every word written with hands that ache from holding mops. Victoria took the notebook, opened it with reverent fingers. Inside, pages and pages of cramped handwriting, legal analysis, cost-benefit calculations, moral philosophy, citations from labor economists and poets and philosophers. A thesis written in stolen moments by a man with 5 hours of sleep. This is... Victoria's voice broke. This is brilliant. This is better than half the MBAs I've hired. Where did you learn?
I didn't learn, Marcus interrupted. I earned. Every hour of lost sleep, every aching muscle, every moment I wanted to quit but didn't, that's my education. That's my tuition. And it cost me more than your 4 years at Stanford. Victoria looked up sharply. How did you know I went to Stanford? Because I clean your office, Marcus said simply. I've seen your diploma, your photos, the invocation to your father's memorial service that you keep in your desk drawer and take out sometimes when you think no one's watching. I know you, Miss Ashford. Not because you've told me. Because I've been invisible in your space for 8 years. I've seen everything you are when you think you're alone. Victoria felt stripped bare, exposed. This man knew her in ways her therapist didn't, her friends didn't, her own reflection didn't. What do you see? Victoria whispered. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, I see someone who inherited an empire and doesn't know if she deserves it. I see someone who measures her worth in dollars because she's forgotten how to measure it in anything else. I see someone who's been rich so long she's forgotten what it costs to be poor. And I see, his voice softened, I see someone who's just starting to understand that $7 can change the world. Victoria's throat tightened. It was just coffee. It was never about coffee. It was about the moment you realized your billions couldn't save you, that you needed something you didn't have, and I had it, and I gave it to you. Not because I'm generous, because I know what it's like to be helpless, to need something simple and not have it. And I would never, never let someone feel that shame alone. I've felt that shame alone my entire life, Victoria said. The words escaped before she could stop them. My father died and left me his company, and everyone said I was lucky. But luck feels like drowning, like being given something so heavy you can't carry it, but everyone expects you to. I've been drowning for 15 years. And this morning, when my card declined, I felt like I was finally allowed to be small, to fail, to need help. Then keep failing, Marcus said, because that's when you're finally real.
Victoria came back the next night, and the next, and the next. She bought new clothes, Target jeans, a $15 t-shirt, work boots that didn't bleed her feet raw. She learned how to mop efficiently, how to clean windows without streaks, how to make invisible labor visible to herself. And she learned names. Carlos, mechanical floors, studying engineering at community college, 3 jobs to pay tuition. Fatima, executive offices, sending half her paycheck to family in Somalia, learning English from library books.
David, overnight security, raising 3 kids alone, sleeping 4 hours a night. Invisible people, all of them, working while the world slept, making empires function. Never seen, never thanked, never known. "You're all invisible," Victoria said one night during break, her hands raw from cleaning. "Not to each other," Fatima replied gently. "We see each other. We know each other's children's names, each other's struggles. We're only invisible to people who don't want to see." "I didn't want to see," Victoria admitted. I wanted to believe that success was enough, that building an empire justified everything. But it doesn't, does it? None of it matters if I can't see the people who make it possible. "So what are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "About seeing us?" "I don't know yet. But I know I can't unsee. And I know that has to cost me something. Real transformation always does." 1 month after the coffee shop, Victoria called Marcus to her office. Not the glass-walled executive suite, a small conference room on the custodial floor. Chairs with worn cushions, a table scarred with coffee rings, the smell of industrial cleaner instead of filtered emptiness. She wanted change things, real changes, living wages, health care, schedules that let you sleep more than 5 hours, education funding, and she paused. "I want you to help me, not as a custodian, as a partner, someone who knows what workers actually need because you've lived it." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because you saved me," Victoria said simply, "with $7, and I've spent a month trying to understand what that meant. And I think it meant that I've been measuring the wrong things. I've been counting dollars instead of lives, profits instead of dignity, success instead of meaning. And I want to learn the mathematics you know. The multiplication where one good thing, $7, 5 hours of sleep, a name remembered, multiplies into futures and dignity and generations of change." "That mathematics will cost you everything," Marcus warned. "Your board won't approve. Your shareholders will revolt. Your competitors will call you weak. You'll lose money, power, position, everything you've built." "Everything I inherited," Victoria corrected. "I didn't build it. My father did. I just maintained it, made it bigger. But I never asked if bigger was better, if profit was purpose, if success was meaning." She looked at Marcus directly. "You said barely is enough. Teach me that mathematics. Teach me how to be someone for whom barely, seeing people, naming them, giving them $7 when they need it, is everything." Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he slid his notebook across the table. "Read this again, all of it. And if you still want to do this, if you're willing to sacrifice your empire to build something real, then come back tomorrow and we'll start the real work." Victoria took the notebook home that night, read every word by lamplight in her penthouse that suddenly felt less like a kingdom and more like a mausoleum. All that glass and chrome and expensive emptiness. Marcus's words were a map, a battle plan, a philosophy written in stolen moments by a man who'd been invisible for 8 years and refused to stay that way. And Victoria realized she'd been invisible too, to herself, hidden behind billions and quarterly earnings and the weight of her father's legacy. But Marcus had seen her, in a coffee shop at 6 a.m., seen past the Hermes wallet and the black Amex and the billions, seen the human underneath, small and helpless and desperately alone. And he'd given her $7, the currency of humanity, the only wealth that multiplied.
For 3 months, Victoria and Marcus met in the basement conference room.
Not CEO and custodian, mentor and student, teacher and learner. Two people trying to translate suffering into salvation. Marcus taught her the mathematics of dignity. You think in addition, Marcus explained one night, his notebook open between them. Rich people always do. Add more wealth, add more properties, add more zeros to the bank account. But poor people, we think in multiplication because we have to. $1 can multiply into breakfast for 3 people if you buy the right cereal. One good wage multiplies into education for a child, which multiplies into opportunity, which multiplies into generations of change. That's not addition, that's multiplication, and it's the only mathematics that matters. Teach me, Victoria said. You can't learn it from a textbook, Marcus replied. You learn it by living it. By understanding that the $7 I gave you wasn't just $7, it was 12 minutes of my life. 12 minutes I could have spent sleeping. And I gave it to you because I saw you drowning. And I know what drowning feels like. When you're drowning, 12 minutes is everything. Victoria's hands were no longer soft. The calluses had formed slowly. Proof of work, of showing up, of sustaining the barely that Marcus had taught her was enough. I'm going to lose my company, Victoria said one night. When I implement these changes, real wages, real benefits, real dignity, the board will vote me out. They'll say I'm destroying shareholder value, that I'm letting emotion override strategy, that my father would be ashamed. Would he? Marcus asked. Victoria thought about her father, Robert Ashford, empire builder, wealth accumulator, a man who died with billions and been mourned by hundreds of people who'd never really known him. My father, Victoria said slowly, believed that success justified everything, that building an empire, no matter the cost, was the ultimate achievement. He paid minimum wage and fought unionization and treated labor as an expense to minimize. And when he died, I inherited his billions and his beliefs. I thought I was honoring his legacy, but... Her voice broke. But legacy isn't about money accumulated. It's about lives touched. And my father touched nothing. He built walls of glass and chrome and called it a kingdom, but he was alone inside it. And now I'm alone inside it, and I don't want to be anymore. Then walk away from the kingdom, Marcus said simply. Build something smaller, something real, something that multiplies. I don't know how, Victoria admitted. You're already doing it. You're here, in a basement conference room, learning from a custodian, letting your hands callous, giving up sleep to understand how the rest of us live. That's not a CEO anymore. That's a human being. And human beings, real ones, don't need kingdoms. They need connection, meaning, purpose. $7 giving freely to someone who needs it. Victoria's hands were no longer soft. The calluses had formed slowly, proof of work, of showing up, of sustaining the barely that Marcus had taught her was enough. I'm going to lose my company, Victoria said one night. When I implement these changes, real wages, real benefits, real dignity, the board will vote me out. They'll say I'm destroying shareholder value, that I'm letting emotion override strategy, that my father would be ashamed. Would he? Marcus asked. Victoria thought about her father, Robert Ashford, empire builder, wealth accumulator, a man who died with billions and been mourned by hundreds of people who'd never really known him.
My father, Victoria said slowly, believed that success justified everything, that building an empire, no matter the cost, was the ultimate achievement. He paid minimum wage and fought unionization and treated labor as an expense to minimize. And when he died, I inherited his billions and his beliefs. I thought I was honoring his legacy, but... Her voice broke. But legacy isn't about money accumulated. It's about lives touched. And my father touched nothing. He built walls of glass and chrome and called it a kingdom, but he was alone inside it. And now I'm alone inside it, and I don't want to be anymore. Then walk away from the kingdom, Marcus said simply. Build something smaller, something real, something that multiplies. I don't know how, Victoria admitted. You're already doing it. You're here, in a basement conference room, learning from a custodian, letting your hands callous, giving up sleep to understand how the rest of us live. That's not a CEO anymore. That's a human being. And human beings, real ones, don't need kingdoms. They need connection, meaning, purpose. $7 given freely to someone who needs it. Victoria looked at her hands, calloused, scarred, beautiful in their ugliness, proof that she'd stopped being a tourist and become a warrior. My father taught me to add. You're teaching me to multiply. That's not just a different mathematics, it's a different way of being human. Yes, Marcus agreed, and it will cost you everything you have. The question is, are you willing to pay that price? Victoria thought about the coffee shop, the declined card, the crumpled $10 bill. The moment when Marcus had looked at her and seen not a CEO, but a person drowning. And he'd saved her. Not with billions, with 12 minutes of his life given freely. Yes, Victoria said, I'm willing to pay.
Victoria stood before her board of directors and confessed. Not a presentation, not a strategy, a confession. I failed a test, Victoria began. Her voice shook, but she didn't hide it, didn't armor herself in CEO confidence, just spoke as herself, small and scared, and finally real. A $7 coffee test. My credit cards didn't work. I had a $100 bill I couldn't use, and I stood there drowning in the simplest problem, how to pay for coffee, while a custodian saved me. Marcus Reed, a man who works in this building, who's cleaned my office for 8 years, who I'd never seen, never knew, never acknowledged existed. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus gave me $7, 12 minutes of his labor, and he said something that changed everything. Right now, at this moment, that makes me richer than you. And he was right. He was richer, not in money, in humanity, in the ability to see someone drowning and save them without hesitation, in knowing that $7, barely anything, is everything when it's given freely. Miss Ashford, her CFO interrupted, this is very touching, but I'm not finished, Victoria said. Her voice was steel now, not CEO steel, the steel of someone who'd learned to fight. For 3 months, I've worked night shift with our custodial team. I've learned their names, their stories, their struggles, and I've learned something my father never taught me. That success built on invisible labor is just expensive emptiness. That empires built on people you refuse to see are just glass prisons. And I'm done. Done pretending quarterly earnings matter more than human dignity. Done measuring worth in dollars instead of lives touched. You're proposing we sacrifice profit for sentiment? A board member scoffed.
I'm proposing we choose meaning over money. Real wages, real benefits, real recognition. It will cost $8 million annually. It will hurt our stock price. It will make us look soft to competitors. And I don't care. Because Marcus Reed taught me mathematics you've never learned. The mathematics of multiplication, where $8 million doesn't just buy higher wages. It buys education for Carlos's engineering degree, medical care for Fatima's family, stability for David's children. It buys futures, and futures multiply in ways profit never will. Your father. My father was wrong, Victoria said. The words felt like freedom. He built an empire on invisible people, on labor treated as expense, on the belief that success justified everything, and he died alone in that empire, surrounded by billions and known by no one. His legacy was emptiness, and I refuse to inherit that anymore. Silence in the boardroom. Then, the door opened. Marcus entered, not in his yellow uniform, but in simple clothes, a button-down shirt, khakis, clean but clearly not expensive. And behind him, Fatima, Carlos, David, a dozen custodial workers, all standing in the doorway of a boardroom where they'd never been allowed. "We're here," Marcus said, simply, "to testify." Another person entered. An elderly black woman Victoria didn't recognize. She wore a simple dress, her hair gray and neat, her hands gnarled with arthritis. "My name is Evelyn Carter," the woman said. Her voice was quiet, but carried weight. "I don't work here, but I worked for Victoria's father. I was his housekeeper for 30 years, raised Victoria from a child. And I need you to understand something about the man whose legacy you're so desperate to protect." Victoria's stomach dropped. "Robert Ashford paid me minimum wage for 30 years. No benefits, no retirement. When I got sick, cancer, he fired me rather than accommodate my treatments. I lost my apartment, spent 2 years homeless, survived on charity and luck. And when Robert died, he left me nothing, not even acknowledgement. 30 years of my life raising his daughter, keeping his home, and I was invisible to him, disposable." Evelyn turned to Victoria. Her eyes were kind despite everything. "You were a good child, Victoria, curious and gentle. But your father taught you not to see me, taught you I was furniture, not human. And you learned that lesson well. Until Marcus," she nodded to him, "taught you differently. Taught you that invisibility is violence, that treating people as expense is cruelty, that your father's legacy was built on suffering."
Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, memories flooding back. Evelyn making breakfast, doing laundry, tucking her in at night when her father was too busy building empires. Evelyn who'd been more mother than employee, and Victoria had forgotten her. Let her disappear into invisibility because that's what her father had taught. "I'm sorry," Victoria choked out. "God, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I did it. I should have." "You were taught not to see," Evelyn said gently. "But you're learning now. That's what matters. You're choosing differently than your father. That's what legacy really means." Then the third person stepped forward. James Chen, Victoria's CFO, the man who'd fought her hardest on every proposed change. "I need to confess something," James said. His voice was unsteady. "I've been fighting Victoria because I was terrified. Because 30 years ago, I was Marcus. I was the custodian working night shift, sleeping 5 hours, fighting to be seen.
And I made it out, got my degree, climbed the ladder, and I spent 30 years pretending I'd been born into the executive class, pretending I didn't know what it cost to be invisible. But Victoria's changes forced me to remember, forced me to see that I became exactly what I once hated. Someone who treats workers as expenses. Someone who forgot where he came from. I was wrong, she's right, and I'm voting to support every change she's proposing. The boardroom exploded. Arguments, accusations, 30 decades of class barriers cracking open in real time. The vote was 6-5. Victoria kept her position by 1 vote. But it wasn't victory. It was just the beginning of a war that would never end.
6 months later, Victoria's wealth had evaporated by half. Stock prices had plummeted. Shareholders were furious. Competitors mocked her publicly. Business analysts called her naive, a trust fund baby playing at revolution. But the changes were real. Carlos had his engineering degree. Fatima's family in Somalia had access to health care. David's children had stability. Marcus worked 8-hour shifts now instead of 10, slept 7 hours instead of 5. And every custodial worker in the building had health care, living wages, dignity. Victoria found Marcus in the break room one evening. Not 2 a.m. anymore. She visited during reasonable hours now, brought coffee, always paying with exact change, knew everyone by name. "I'm losing everything," Victoria said. She wasn't complaining, just stating fact. My wealth, my position, my father's empire, all of it crumbling because I chose to see. "Are you sorry?" Marcus asked. Victoria thought about this, about glass-walled penthouses and Herman Miller chairs and air that smelled like filtered nothingness, about the silence that had been her constant companion for 41 years. "No," she said finally, "I'm not sorry. Because I'd rather have this," she gestured to the basement break room with its scarred table and flickering lights, and Carlos and Fatima and David laughing over coffee, "than all the billions in the world. I'd rather be here with people who see me than alone in a kingdom I never built." "You're not alone anymore," Marcus observed. "No," Victoria agreed, "I'm not. And that's worth everything I've lost." Elijah appeared in the doorway, Marcus's son, now 8, wearing his perpetual red jacket. "Miss Victoria, I made you something." He held out a drawing. Victoria and Marcus and Elijah, stick figures holding hands. Above them, in careful crayon letters, "Family isn't money. Family is seeing." Victoria's vision blurred. "Did your dad teach you that?" "No," Elijah said seriously. "I learned it by watching you. You didn't see us before, now you do. That made you part of our family, because family is just people who see each other, really see, not the outside stuff, the inside stuff." "The inside stuff," Victoria repeated. She looked at Marcus. "Your son is wiser than every business school professor I ever had." "Because he learned from suffering," Marcus said quietly. "His mother left. He learned that love isn't about money. It's about showing up, about being seen. You showed up, Victoria, every night for 3 months. You worked beside me, learned my name, saw me. That's not a CEO anymore. That's family." Victoria took Elijah's drawing home that night, hung it in her penthouse, which she was selling next month because she didn't need 5 bedrooms overlooking Central Park anymore. She was moving to Queens, closer to the people who'd taught her that barely was enough, that $7 was everything, that being seen was the only wealth that multiplied. Her father had left her billions and taught her to add. Marcus had given her $7 and taught her to multiply. And Victoria finally knew which mathematics mattered.
5 years after the coffee shop, Victoria Ashford testified before Congress. Not as a billionaire. She wasn't one anymore. The reforms had cost too much, the empire had crumbled, her wealth had multiplied into other people's futures instead of her own bank account. But she stood before cameras and politicians and the world watching, and she told the truth. My name is Victoria Ashford, and I failed a $7 coffee test. I stood in a coffee shop, powerless, while a custodian named Marcus Reed saved me with 12 minutes of his labor. And that moment taught me something my father never did, that wealth without sight is just expensive blindness, that empires built on invisible people are just glass prisons, that real legacy isn't measured in dollars accumulated, it's measured in lives multiplied. She told the whole story, the night shifts, the calloused hands, the notebook filled with philosophy written in stolen moments, the board vote that nearly destroyed her, the choice between kingdom and humanity. Marcus taught me mathematics my father never learned, Victoria said, the mathematics of multiplication, where $7 doesn't just buy coffee, it buys connection, where one living wage multiplies into education, opportunity, dignity, futures, where barely 5 hours of sleep, 12 minutes of labor given freely is everything. That's not sentiment, that's economics, the economics of meaning. She proposed legislation, not as a CEO now, but as someone who'd learned to see. Mandatory living wages, worker dignity laws, corporate accountability for invisible labor. I inherited billions. I didn't earn them. I was born visible, while Marcus was born invisible. That's not merit, that's luck. And our system is built on pretending luck is merit, on letting some people stay invisible so others can accumulate wealth we don't deserve. It's time we learn different mathematics, the mathematics where we multiply dignity instead of adding profit, where we measure legacy in lives touched instead of dollars hoarded, where $7 given freely is richer than $3 billion kept frozen. The testimony went viral. Victoria became a symbol, hero to some, traitor to others. Her company barely existed anymore, but the Marcus Reed Community Education Center thrived. Hundreds of workers learning, growing, multiplying their futures. Marcus watched from the gallery, Elijah beside him, now 12, still wearing red, still drawing pictures of families made from seeing. After the testimony, a reporter asked Marcus, "Is Victoria Ashford a hero?" Marcus thought about this. No, heroes don't take 41 years to learn to see. But you know what's harder than being born seeing? Learning to see after a lifetime of blindness. Victoria didn't save anyone. She just stopped being blind. And that's the bravest thing someone rich can do. Stop pretending their wealth makes them wise. Start learning from the people they've been taught not to see.
Victoria's apartment in Queens was small. One bedroom, a radiator that clanked like Marcus's used to. Neighbors whose names she knew because walls were thin and life was loud. She loved it. The sound of life. Children laughing, couples arguing, music playing. The clank of pipes and hum of traffic and all the noise she'd paid millions to avoid in her penthouse. This was the sound of being human, of being connected, of being seen and seeing others. Marcus and Elijah came for dinner every Sunday. Victoria cooked now. Badly, but she was learning. They ate at a table that wobbled, drank wine from jelly jars, talked about Marcus's students at the community center, Elijah's dreams of becoming a teacher, Victoria's work advocating for invisible workers. "Do you miss it?" Elijah asked one night. He was 12 now, old enough to understand what Victoria had sacrificed. Being rich? Having fancy stuff? Victoria thought about this, about Herman Miller chairs, and Hermes wallets, and glass-walled kingdoms overlooking Manhattan. "I miss the silence sometimes," Victoria admitted. "Rich people's silence. The kind where you never hear struggle or suffering or life. But then I remembered that silence wasn't peace. It was loneliness, and I'd rather have this."
She gestured to the wobbling table and jelly jar glasses, and Marcus smiling at his son. Then all the silence in the world. Why? Elijah pressed. Because barely is enough, Victoria said, echoing Marcus's words from 5 years ago. Barely means I'm here, with people who see me, people I see. That's not barely, that's everything. Marcus raised his jelly jar. To barely being enough. To $7 changing the world, Victoria added. To seeing each other, Elijah finished. They clinked glasses, jelly jars that had once held grape jam, now holding cheap wine, in an apartment that would have horrified Victoria's father, but felt like home in ways his empire never had. Because this was the mathematics of multiplication, where $7 became connection, where barely became everything, where one person learning to see multiplied into hundreds learning the same, where legacy wasn't about money accumulated, but lives touched, where Victoria Ashford, former CEO, current human being, had finally learned that the only wealth that mattered was the kind you gave away, the kind that multiplied, the kind that made barely enough into everything.
If this story touched your soul, you've experienced the power of Becca's stories. Subscribe for powerful narratives every day about the cruel tests that break us open, the $7 that buy humanity, the invisible people who teach us mathematics our fathers never learned, and the courage to choose barely over billions. Comment below, when was the last time you failed a simple test? What did it teach you about who you really are? Our mission is to inspire your life and brighten your day through powerful narratives of transformation and human resilience.